What's up? Welcome back. This is your host, Siris King. This podcast episode, I keep doing it. This YouTube episode, I'm going to talk about power. What's power? And one of the reasons why a lot of people are under illusion when it comes to power. Power is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the spiritual world, right? So if you ask a person what's power, what will they say? You will probably get someone, if you're talking about spiritually, you probably get someone who's talking about superpowers, right? So, the ability to shoot lightning out your hands, kind of this Dragon Ball Z mentality, right? You get a whole bunch of people who would say that's power. Now, ask a magician, you might get, he or she might say, they could agree with the first people, but they might also say the ability to contact certain type of entities, certain type of spirits, certain type of gods. For them, elementals. For them, the power is coming from contacts with different beings, right? And, for other people, power may be knowledge. He who has the most knowledge has the most power. That one is a little bit harder, honestly, I'm not going to talk about the knowledge part as much. I have a whole philosophy on knowledge as well, but I'll probably cover that in another episode. I would say this. When you deal with power, and I forgot the fourth. The fourth, power could be, people who have the ability to wield influence in the world, whether it's political, whether it's financial, whether it's in the criminal underworld. Basically, the ability to influence events, influence people, influence markets. So I'm going to talk about more from the spiritual aspect, but the fourth way is very related to what I'm talking about, though, because the person who's looking at this from the material aspect of being able to well control markets, sometimes whole societies, subcultures, organizations, religions, political groups, sometimes racial groups, they actually have their definition of power is actually closer to reality than some spiritualists, right? So for the spiritual people who think power is Dragon Ball Z stuff, shooting lightning out your hands, or, just being able to activate some latent abilities that people have, right? Or maybe a god or force would give you power, right? Basically, some gods, the more powerful the god or force, the more power you have, right? So I think for a lot of people, the majority is probably on that level. The majority of people, when they think power spiritually, they're talking about the power God has. Right? They're talking about the power that a god or gods have, where they can give you abilities, give you access to certain things you didn't have. And this is very interesting because when you study different spiritual systems, right? Kabbalah will be the system that answers this question the best. Because with Kabbalah and with certain type of spiritual systems, they didn't depend on forces or gods as much. And I know for some people, God is a very strange term, or gods, because for some people, some ancient people could label different cultures, like different intelligences of nature, but not label them gods, right? So gods is particularly coming from the time when Greeks came in, as we talk about the gods as we know it. But I still think it's easier because the Western culture is what's the dominant culture. So even if some people think they're not influenced by that, they tend to be influenced by it, right? So then when you look at, for instance, the argument the Christian, the Muslim, or the Jew would make versus, let's say, somebody who's from a polytheistic religion is there's one God versus many gods. And in a sense, both arguments are sort of counterproductive because in the esoteric versions of all systems, they tend to agree on a few things, right? So Kabbalah is the best example of this. When you see the tree of life, what is the tree of life? The tree of life is always known to be a map. It was always known to be a map of, could be the consciousness, a map of the universe. Some people say 10 animations or 10 fractal frequencies that are the result of the God particle, the God essence, the God vibration, right? And when you look at it from a certain angle, in Kabbalah, especially if you're doing magical Kabbalah, what are you doing? You're basically becoming a God worker. You're basically becoming like God. And what that means is, and this is where you're going to get into the true essence of power. The true essence of power is being able to integrate with your environment, whether it's the cosmos or whether it's Mother Nature. And when you integrate with your environment and when you harmonize with your environment, you become the vessel for certain forces. So, in a sense, think of it from the real world. If you got a police officer, yes, the police officer has a gun. But the police officer's real power is he's a representative of the state or the city or the district at that time. So in a sense, he's a vessel for that city or district to work with, right? To work through. That's power. So when you see things like when Christ says, without the Father, I'm nothing, it's basically symbolic of any Kabbalist understanding that his or her power is coming from the tree. And when it comes from the tree, they become a vessel for the tree to work with. And that becomes the concept or the essence of the Theurgy. If you look up the Theurgy, people will say Theurgy is basically giving life to inanimate objects, which it could be. But the Theurgy also means God worker, miracle worker. And the Theurgy understands that they are becoming like their body and their mind is a tree of life. And they channel that energy through their body. And in a sense, that's the primary difference between somebody who does the Theurgy versus someone who is a magician. A normal magician, even though they both could be magicians, they both be classified that. A normal magician usually gets power from beings, whether it's elementals, whether it's the spirits of the dead, sometimes whether it's forces of Mother Nature, which kind of ties into shamanism. Like, that's how magic and shamanism tie in together. Where Theurgy gets energy from the tree of life itself. But from both angles, the magician or the Theurgy or the shaman knows that they're the vessel. And what makes the human being special is the human being is a multidimensional being. The human being exists on 7 dimensions at the same time. The human being in itself is not powerful. There's other species more powerful than human beings when you're dealing with higher level spirituality. But the difference the human has is that he or she, amongst humans, can channel energy from other vessels, from other sources at a much easier rate. That's the difference. So when you're looking at power basically is the ability to harmonize and connect to your environment and become a vessel for your environment to work through, because your environment can't do it by itself. That is the primary aspect of power. And the reason why I say this is because when in spirituality, right, and in a lot of, whether you talk about yoga, whether you talk about Western occultism, they always say this: powers are something that may come or may not come. They're just tools that you get when you're in a journey of enlightenment. That part is true. But the East pushes that more than the West does. In the West, they kind of understand that powers by itself is more neutral. Because in the East, it kind of gets into morals. And, if you're not a certain type of person, you don't get powers. And the real key is, it's true. I give the East, what I agree with them is, chasing powers should not be the fundamental purpose of spirituality, because chances are you will not acquire it like that. I give you that. That is true. But another reason why you won't acquire power is because you don't know what power is. That's the key. So when I've done a few videos where I talk about respecting nature, respecting the cosmos, understanding it's not just about the abstract principles. You can't understand abstract principles unless you understand the physical principles right in front of you. I've made many videos on that. But one thing I really haven't pushed that I probably should push more is the fact that's why I decided to make this video about power. Because in a sense, I think a lot of people have a lot of false ideas of what power is. In a sense, if you look at it as two worlds, the visible world and the invisible world, right? The invisible world gives birth to the visible world. So the invisible world, think of it as a world of energy, a world of thought, both abstract and kind of more less dense thoughts, right? Or heavier thoughts where you can actually access that with pictures in your mind. And then abstract thoughts, which you have a harder time accessing, right? So the inner world, or the inner reality. And when you talk about mental plane and astral plane, I'm calling that labeling all as the inner plane. Inner plane is where power generates, right? And then the physical is where we experience the power, where we experience the forces of the inner worlds mixing together to create a reality that helps us evolve on the spiritual journey. But when you look at it like that, think about it from this angle. Inner world, outer world. But then you have the worlds in between. And I'm not really talking about other dimensions only. When I talk about the worlds in between, I'm also talking about the worlds that are physical, but the world that you don't see. So when you get into the world of atoms, when you get into the world of microbes, you're talking about vessels of energy. This is the key that people don't really see. So, for instance, because I know that's a harder concept to understand. So look at it from this angle. If you're a magician and your powers come from the elements, right, itself. Now, a lot of people in the channel are more familiar with the East. So in the East, they don't really get into the spirits of the elements as much, right? So if you go to Taoism, let's say for instance, fire, water, wind, metal, wood, right? The Taoists don't really get into the intelligences of those elements. They just get into the raw essence of the elements. In the Western occult world, Hermeticism, Wicca, they get into the the intelligences of the elements. So when you get into the intelligence of the elements, right, or they say in Palo, or they say in some of African spiritual systems, the spirit of the water, the spirit of the fire, right? Both the East and West are still talking about the same thing, but in the West, which is primarily influenced by African religions, going from sub-Saharan Africa to Egypt, to Greece, to Rome, to France, to England, then to America, they're influenced by the spirits of the elements, right? So they get more into, let's say, the mythological essences of what the elements are. They're doing the same thing as they do in the East, just a little bit more personal. And in my opinion, probably more effective for channeling energy, per se. The East might be better for channeling, for harnessing energy internally. So if you think about it, then that's why in the East, they'll push powers is not really important. And I actually do think the Eastern way is probably more accessible and probably more realistic for the average person. I do admit that. But if you look at it carefully, when you deal with elements, right, or when you deal with gods, right, because then you have gods who are representative of the elements. You're still talking about tapping into the elements. Or if you do a totemism or shamanism, you might get animals that are closer to nature, so you channel the spirit or the essence of that animal. Same thing. But there's going to be a difference. I think for the person dealing with elementals, the person dealing with God forms, those are things that can get corrupted quicker, especially God forms. God forms is number one. So in magic, most of the time, they tend to be in obsession with God forms and angels. God forms get corrupted quicker. So what is that? What does get corrupted quicker means? Well, in a sense, what ends up happening when you look at the tree of life, and the tree of life was a map of the universe. Think about what they say the tree of life is. The tree of life is also the map of the planets, right? So Malakut is Earth, Yesod is the moon, Had is Mercury. So in a sense, you're harnessing the energies of what the planets are visible symbols of. So mercurial energy, lunar energy, which is the moon, Venusian energy is far beyond the planets, but the planets are the biggest expressions of those energies. And not only are they expressions of those energies, they're not as corruptible. That's the difference. So when you get into the concept of angels and demons, what is a demon? A demon is just a corrupted angel, right? And if you look at the angels are kind of like God forms or thought forms. If you think about it. Now, there might be different people who have different interpretations of angels, but for the most part, they tend to be known as thought forms, meaning intelligences that are self-generated, that you focus on, and you have positive, hence angels. You have negative, hence demons. But the positive thought forms can still get corrupted. So for instance, this is why then people would say, I seen the angel Gabriel, I seen the angel Michael, I seen the angel this. And they can be seeing entities impersonating angels. They can be going crazy, right? Sometimes they're telling the truth. Sometimes they're seeing real things, possibly. But chances are they may have a problem with their astral perception. And then they see things that they think they see, and they may not see it. And even if they do see it, and this is why you get the concept of angels and demons, or gods versus demons, because God forms, traditionally, can get corrupted, can get misunderstood. And when they get corrupted and misunderstood, especially because God forms at times need to be recharged. So when a high-level magician or alchemist or theurgist makes a God form, unless they recharge it, the God form eventually gets corrupted. Hence why you have good gods and bad gods. But with the tree of life, instead of saying Kali Saturn, I just go straight to Saturn. You see? Instead of saying Poseidon is Neptune, I just go to Neptune. So the tree of life is a map that teaches you to harness energy from the upper worlds. And when you harness the energy from the upper worlds, what is the planetary energies, doesn't get corrupted as much. Now, is planetary energies perfect? No, planetary energies could get corrupted too. That's why you have astrology. You know, astrology teaches you the rhythm, the ebbs and flows of the planets. But wherever you're talking about elements, wherever you're talking about gods, wherever you're talking about planets, wherever you're talking about atoms, wherever you're talking about microbes, in all scenario, power is integration with the environment. That's why for me, I love shamanism. That's why I love shamanism, because totemism, right? Animism. Animals actually get corrupted less than God forms. And this is what matches my other videos when I said if a spiritual system does not teach you how to harmonize in nature, that spiritual system is ineffective. If you're using God forms and you understand that the God is a God of lightning, God of fire, God of this, or the spirit, because some people don't like the word God, so the spirit of fire, spirit of lightning. That's effective because then you can understand the force of water, of fire, of lightning, of wind, of death. You understand it. But if you are focused on the God form, then that's not productive. This is why I never like the alien talk. Because with the alien talk, you're now focused on intelligences, supposedly. This is if you believe in aliens, right? And I have my doubts. But if you believe in aliens, you're focusing on energies that's outside your environment and it's not teaching you to harmonize your environment. So hence it becomes counterproductive. That's the point. So when you're dealing with God forms or elementals, now if you ask me which one is better, elementals or God forms, elementals are far better. Far better. Remember what God forms are. God forms are just basically when a magician, a third-year alchemist says that you're too simple to, that you don't understand the spiritual world, so you understand it if I say God, right? Or if I say spirit. And they create that. And eventually the spirit takes on its own identity. Not saying that's bad, but what ends up happening is it kind of misconstrues what power is, because then power to a lot of people is making contact with a certain type of spirit. Now, if you come from an Eastern standpoint, power would be harmonizing the energies in you internally, which is actually not bad and is actually effective. The problem I've noticed, the biggest problem with the Eastern schools is that because they tend to focus a lot on abstract principles, they don't understand that no matter who you are, if you're not able to harmonize with your environment, I don't care what you are, you're not going to get any power. So even if when you get into abstract principles, like remember, the East, it's a very powerful, like they produce very powerful systems. But I think what a lot of people forget is that unless you go to the East and really absorb the Eastern mindset, you're dealing with Easterners who come to the West to make money. And so when they come to the West to make money, they repackage the systems. Why do you think Hatha Yoga? Most people think yoga is Hatha Yoga. Even when you deal with East Asian spiritual system, like from China, Korea, Japan, in ancient China, martial arts, right? Healing, Chinese alchemy is all mixed together. It only became separate more recently. This is why in the East, most of the time, it's very rare that you get an authentic Eastern system that gets into Eastern spirituality that doesn't go into healing. In the East, healing was just as important as the traditional metaphysics that most people are looking for. So a lot of times the East, like it may seem like I'm bashing the East, I'm not bashing the East, is that how most people who practice it are not doing it the way they do it in the East. That's the difference. That's the difference. You study Taoism, and you don't study Chinese medicine, you don't study acupuncture, yeah, you're not doing it the way it's supposed to be done. There's no question. You study Tibetan Buddhism, but you don't study Tibetan medicine, you're not doing it the way you're really supposed to be doing it, like the way they do in Tibet or in the offshoots, like in the places in India and Nepal. You're not doing it the way they do it. So yeah, that'll be a problem. That's the difference. So the advantage that the person who's a Kabbalist has, just like the person who's a shaman has. The shaman might have a bigger advantage than the Kabbalists. Because even the Kabbalists might get a little abstract. Even when you get into the planets themselves, they have ebbs and flows. You got to study astrology a little bit. If I'm working with Geberer, which is the spirits of Mars, I got to know there's going to be certain times I'm not supposed to be accessing Mars. A lot of Kabbalists don't know that, to be honest. I would just keep it 100. So the shaman, in some way, has advantages of all of them, because the shaman is accessing the energy from their environment directly. And the real key is, the way it really works, If you think about the nature and the cosmos as all these little subcultures, right? All these little worlds. When you look at it, if you do spirits of the fire, spirits of the water, spirits of the wind, it goes, the earth is closest to us. The next elemental kingdom is the water element. After that's wind. After that's fire. Fire is the furthest from us. The tree of life is also a map, right? So Malakut is actually described, and that's why Malakut has 4 colors. Like if you look at all the Sephiros, they have 1 color for each Sephir. Malakut has 4. Because once you get past those 4, then you deal with the spirits of the moon. Then you deal with the spirits of Mercury. The further away you get, the harder it is to master. So as humans, we're messed up because as earth element for most humans are the ones that's weak. Right? So most humans will focus on water, fire, and wind. Like yoga is tend to be centered on wind, manipulation of breath. And we are messed up from the foundation. Because earth is supposed to be the easiest, and yet earth is the hardest for most people. Then, once you get past the 4 elemental kingdoms, you start talking about spirits of the moon, Yesod, spirits of Mercury, spirits of Venus. What eventually happens is these are representative of intelligences. But the further away you get, the harder it is to master. So when the shaman is coming in, and the shaman sometimes doesn't even focus on the elements, the shaman says, I'm going to deal with the plants, I'm going to deal with the animals. The plants and the animals are actually closer to us than the elemental kingdoms. So the spirits of the dead, the plants and the animals, the spirits of the animals, the spirits of the plants, the spirits of the land. Those are the closest intelligences. So that's why shamans, in my opinion, probably have it the easiest when it comes to certain, if it's real shamanism. And again, there's a lot of shamanism, animism, totemism that's not real anymore. But if it's real, they tend to do better because they're harmonizing with their immediate environment. The further away you get, the harder it is. So for instance, animals are closer to us than plants. So it's actually easier to harness totems, right? The animal spirits than it is plant spirits. Then after plants is minerals, which is tied into elemental spirits. It's actually easier to access plants than it is minerals. So, in a sense, basically, power is integrating with your environment, but it's also seeing which aspect of the environment is easier to harness energy from. So, the East harnesses energy from the internal environment, yes. But the weakness is, that's why Taoism, in my opinion, sometimes has an edge over traditional certain styles of Indian yoga, because Taoism, I'll give it this. They deal with the elements, they deal with the physical environment because they're so related to the Tantra that, for me, that tends to be a very effective system. I may not agree with all their thoughts on the elements themselves, but their approach is the right one, in my opinion, because they get into the physical body, so that gets into the cells. And eventually what the person, or the essences, like the 3 treasures of Taoism, Jing, Chen, and Shi, right? Because eventually what ends up happening is that once you start to understand that the human body not only has inner energy, but you get energy from the environment. This is what Taoism teaching you. You get energy from the environment, you get energy from above, from the skies. And you could actually harmonize them in both and then channel it through your body. So the Kabbalists is doing the same thing. They channel energy from the stars or the planets. But the Taoist is also challenging that, but mixing it with the energy of the environment. And doesn't say I'm not saying that Kabbalism doesn't do that either, but because Kabbalah is mathematically, in my opinion, the most accurate system, but then it's still interpreted by humans, sometimes they could focus on the abstract the way certain styles of yoga from India do. That's the difference. Where in the Taoist, they get into the elements itself. And in a sense, if the Taoists and shamans are teaching us anything, is basically power comes from not just the alliances you make, but also harmonizing with the environment that's closest to your experience. Once you conquer that, then you go to the next one. So if let's say for instance, I'm dealing with the elementals, right? Earth is closest to me, get earth. Then water, then wind, then fire. Boom. But then if I said, well, the elementals or the elemental energies are still they're still based on the minerals. So plants and animals are closer, or even the spirits of the dead, which are the ancestors, are closer. That's why a lot of African, Native American, Aboriginal systems go with the ancestors. Why? The ancestors are closer than even the animals or the plants, because it's human. So we start off as humans. So we're in that kingdom. Now, ancestral energy could get corrupted probably easier than even the energy of the gods, right? So when I say corrupted, other spirits can impersonate them. You could make it up in your mind. it's more corruptible. But certain systems, specifically African systems, have a safeguard where you don't see as many outside entities impersonating ancestors as much. But then you see sometimes in Kabbalah, Hermetic systems, they still don't like it, so they wouldn't say, oh, don't deal with ancestors as much in the beginning, because it can be hijacked. It's like a signal that can be hijacked. But basically, that's what power is. And that's why most people don't access power. Because if you come and say, I'm going to take the Eastern method, and I'm going to use abstract principles to harness energy, the ability to harness energy is going to be limited. You'll probably be able to take control of your thoughts to some extent. To some extent. Not quite abstract thought, but everyday thought. You might learn to concentrate a little bit. You might learn to control your emotions, right? And those are all good. And that's all effective. And that's what you should be going for first. But then it matches why then they would say don't look for powers, because, or people would say power itself is something that can't be attained. Because in a sense, your environment can actually overpower. This is what they learned in shamanism. Like when the shaman says, and this is why I picked Chinese medicine, because I'm very familiar with it. In Chinese medicine, you say the stomach is the first brain. And they would say that because it will match when the shaman say, listen, if you're not in tune with your stomach, you can meditate all day, right? Those intelligences, like if your stomach is messed up, you try to meditate, it's not going to work. You're not going to harness any energy, right? So when you look at it from that aspect, you have to understand that in a sense, power is something that's really misunderstood from almost any angle. When you even talk about power from a political standpoint, it's about the alliances that you make. When you look at the underworld, you could talk about the Italian mafia, you could talk about the Chinese triads, but this is an organized criminal syndicate. Why? It's networks around the world that interact with each other. The same thing happens with the spiritual world. That's what power is. And in a sense, this is why then when people are focused more on only abstract principles and they don't understand how they fit in their environment, they will never get power. And power doesn't always have to mean just doing supernatural things. That's not the primary reason for it. Power could just mean understanding and learning how to move with your environment. You're so focused on abstract principles that you are like almost like an alien to your environment. And then that's why then you get a whole bunch of people who focus on aliens. It all matches. And once you understand that, you begin to take back control. You begin to take back power. You begin to understand that even when, if you match this with my last video, when you understand that nature as you see it has been recreated, and when nature that you see has been recreated, because most of us don't understand nature, that's the reason why you need a teacher. That's the reason why you need a guru. That's the reason why you need a secret society. And I'm not telling you to say I'm evil, any one of those three. I'm just an observer, observing what I see and retelling it and hoping to inspire. That's why I don't tell people they shouldn't get a teacher. They shouldn't join a secret society or fraternal order. Why? Because the natural laws of nature, or the natural way of nature in the cosmos, is so distant from the human experience that you're not going to probably learn that by yourself at this point. Maybe that was how it was in the old days. But since the time of Atlantis, if you believe in Atlantis, since the time of Egypt, Sumeria, India, and China, right? Since the time of, empires of Timbuktu in West Africa, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Olmecs, Mayans, Aztecs, you probably had a teacher. Or you probably had a fraternal order you joined. Why? Because it's like the shaman. If you look at animals, there's no shamans among animals. The snakes don't have a snake that says, oh, I'm going to teach all the other snakes about how to harmonize with the environment. No, because the snakes know how to harmonize with them. They're already harmonized with the environment. But if you look at shamanism, all the people in the tribe go to the shaman. The shaman is the one who sees nature for what it is. If the shaman is the one that sees nature for what it is, you have to go to him or her or shamanist to get that understanding of nature. Just like then, if you're from the Western world, you're probably or Eastern world, you're probably gonna not be able to see that by yourself, because nature as you know it, like if you look at my last video, when I said the tree of life or Mother Nature, it's basically repackaged by certain forces and repackaged to you in a way. And I said this by giving the example of look at the planet Earth. You go to space, the human body is not designed to live in space, right? The Earth has a magnetic field that protects us from cosmic rays, gamma rays, solar radiation. So if the cosmos was the real essence of nature, the environment has given us a safe haven that's unique in the solar system, right? Which is no other life that we know of in the solar system that protects us and gives us the ability, when it protects us, to then harmonize ourselves and then begin the process of evolving and then eventually maybe ascending or eventually being able to conquer death. Without the environment that Earth gives us, we won't be able to do that. This is basically the same thing. If this physical world is a copy of the spiritual world, and the cosmos is bigger than nature, the majority of the inner planes is not accessible to the traditional human mind. So then the traditional human mind then needs a teacher or a guide to get that. That's not how it always was, but that's how it evolved, because we've allowed ourselves to be so disconnected from nature. And that is a travesty, but that's the reality of the world. That's why I don't love the Fraternal Order Secret Society stuff. I wish the average person could just read a book and get enlightenment, but that's a pipe dream, and anyone who tells you that is not really thinking realistically. So part of the reason why it's become so hard to attain is because we don't understand what power is. So again, power is harmonize with your environment and seeing which aspect of the environment is closer to your experience. You conquer that, or you get in tune with that, then you go to the next one. So if you're a human, you deal with the spirits of the, like some people say, deal with the spirits of the dead. That's still the human, right? Deal with the gods. That's still the human interpretation of nature forms. Then after that, then you deal with the animals, totemism, animism. Then you deal with plants. Then you deal with the minerals, which is the elementals themselves. Or you go to the complete opposite end, go to Kabbalah, do the tree of life, deal with the, which is probably what most people watching this video, probably the path that they should take, in my opinion. That's just me saying it. And from that tree of life, it rewires your mind. Your body has a physical reaction. Then you begin to slowly being able to harness energy. That's true power. Eventually, you might need a guide on that. And when you have a guide on that, they come from a chain, a lineage. And when there's an energetic exchange between you and the guide, they energetically connect you to a lineage. Because why? Because you can't see the true inner plane in its pure essence, because our understanding of nature is not the real understanding of nature. Like I said in my last video, you live in a city, you live in a city long enough, you can't go back in the forest. You can't go in the desert. Take the average person, take them into Antarctica, they'll die. I know Antarctica is the most extreme environment on Earth, but you see what I'm saying. So hopefully you understand, the more you understand what power is, before you begin to harness your own power. So Siris King, till next time, peace.